Hello, and welcome to our RBT webinar on rapport building. I'm Amy Cook, the Community Manager for Rasmus. For those of you that may not know, Rasmus is a clinical ABA software company with the goal of making ABA professionals' jobs easier so that they can focus on the child in front of them. Let me tell you a little bit about my background, and then we will hear from our guest speaker. I'm a BCBA and have enjoyed working in schools, clinics, homes, and organizations in the field of ABA for the last 20 years. I'm passionate about building a community of ABA professionals that can empower and encourage one another, so together we can make a positive impact on countless children's lives. I'm excited to share our fabulous guest speaker, Celia, and I'll let her introduce herself and share about her background.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Okay. I got my training working in public schools. I continue to provide consultations to schools and clinics and to families. Like many of you, I work for maybe different organizations, wear different hats. I currently work for a local consulting company here in New Jersey, where I do a lot of school consultations. I also work for FTF Behavioral Consulting based in Western Massachusetts, where I'm a lead consultant, and my primary role is to disseminate the practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment in addressing interfering behaviors. I'm also an academic instructor and has taught various ABA courses with Rider University here in Princeton, Behavioral Momentum India, and the Institute per la Ricerca in Italy. And I'm currently a faculty with Capella University's Master's ABA program. So it's been a real privilege to have the opportunity to interact with so many students and aspiring technicians. In my hobby, in my spare time, I'm also a facilitator and admin for a large ABA study group on Facebook, and we have cultivated over 54,000 members worldwide, I believe. So it's been such a passion of mine to help aspiring behavior analysts. And I think one of the passion is because I first contacted the science of behavior and analysis as a consumer. I'm a mother of 2 neurodivergent children, one being autistic, and I just want to give a shout out to all the learners out there who have taught us to stay humble and be resilient. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. We're excited to talk about strengthening relationships with clients, families, and clinicians. But first, we wanted to take a minute to share our appreciation for you. We know ABA therapy would not be possible without our behavior technicians, and our team wants to give back to the behavior tech community. We hope to empower and encourage you to grow as professionals. We also want to build deeper connections so we can grow together in the future. This evening, our focus is going to be on rapport building with clients, families, and clinicians. I want to start with a moment for you to reflect on what rapport means to you. Go ahead and share in the chat what rapport means to you in your own words. I know we're having a little technical difficulties with the chat, so if the chat doesn't work, you could even try putting it in the Q&As, and I'll look at that real quick. Awesome. I see engagement.
Yeah, great.
Building relationships with a client, building relationships with clients and families, building connections, trust. Awesome. Lots of the things we're going to touch on tonight. Thank you so much. Well, lots of great responses. Let's look at what Webster has to say. A friendly, harmonious relationship, especially a relationship characterized by agreement, mutual understanding, or empathy that makes communication possible or easy. What resonates with you? Put it in the chat or the questions and answers. And great, looks like our chat is working now. Is that right? We've got N here.
Yes, it's working.
Okay, yay. Okay, well, I really like the word harmonious. Rapport is not one-sided, and flexibility and adjustments are often needed. We also need empathy in order to communicate effectively. Now that we have defined rapport, why is it so important for behavior technicians? This time it really should work in the chat. Awesome. Anyone want to add? Oh, awesome. It allows for honest and open communication. Assent, wonderful, because it allows our consumers to see us as people, not just clinical machines. Love it. The harmonious relationships. Very good.
Can I add something, Amy, about harmonious relationship?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, to create the effects of harmonious, it does require all parties to engage in responses that continue to serve as an SD or discriminative stimulus for ongoing interaction. And, the metaphor we spoke about, Amy, earlier was like the ballroom dancing or the pair skating team, right? The responses of one partner is going to shape the responses of another partner. So behavior shapes behavior. It's never just one-sided. It's always bi-directional, if not multi-directional.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, well, you all have lots of wonderful things to say, and I know some of these have already been touched on, but let's go deeper and take a look at how rapport positively impacts clinical outcomes, building trust, and adding joy. If our clients exhibit fewer challenging behaviors, we're able to teach more skills and have more fun. One of my favorite professional books is The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And this book shares how much time and resources are taken up when we don't have trust. Just think about the amount of time you would spend reviewing a contract from an organization you don't trust compared to reviewing a contract from your trustworthy best friend or family member's company or organization. Trust speeds up everything and makes progress easier and more enjoyable for everyone. Let's look at some research that shows firsthand how rapport impacts clinical outcomes. Dr. Amanda Kelly, with some colleagues, researched the effects of pre-session pairing on the challenging behavior and academic responding of children with autism. In the context of multiple baseline across participants design, the participants exhibited fewer challenging behaviors when instructional sessions were preceded by pre-session pairing than when they were not. Two alternative interpretations of pre-session pairing should be considered. First, pre-session pairing may serve as an abolishing operation for attention maintained or escape maintained challenging behavior during instruction. Second, preceding the academic session with reinforcing or high probability activities may increase the student's engagement with academic tasks in a manner similar to the compliance increasing effects of the high probability request sequence. Now that we know why rapport is so important, let's dive deeper into ways to build rapport with clients, families, and clinicians. Let's first focus on building relationships with clients. We sometimes need to look at what is not rapport in order to get a better understanding of what rapport building with clients actually looks like. So we want to make sure we are not just supervising play. That's one-sided and not that harmonious dance that Celia was telling us about. We don't want to become a vending machine. We should not be constantly talking, and we certainly don't want to ignore our learners' behavior when trying to build rapport. All of these actions lean one-sided. Instead, let's share experiences, make it harmonious. Follow your learner's lead, respond to all behaviors that might involve showing empathy and compassion when your learner is struggling. Lastly, we need to be patient and build trust. This is not something that's going to happen immediately. Rapport is an ongoing learning process where adjustments and flexibility are needed. I'm going to talk briefly about HRE because I think it's a great way to build rapport with clients throughout sessions. It was coined by Dr. Greg Hanley and is used in skills-based treatment. HRE stands for happy, relaxed, and engaged. It's the idea that we all learn best when we're happy, relaxed, and engaged. So promoting HRE is like putting money in the bank. We want to make sure you have reserves in the bank to address unexpected expenses. Remember, every time we deliver an EO, you are withdrawing from the bank. That means rapport building with clients must be ongoing. We can't just promote HRE at the beginning of sessions. And this is just another example of what rapport building should look like. Yes, rapport building is crucial with new relationships, but it still needs to be ongoing. Rapport building should not just be used as an antecedent strategy. We want to make sure that we're not emptying the gas tank. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to Celia. Oh, I think you're on mute, Celia.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's focus on the families. As practitioner and technician, rapport is built by listening and collaborating with families, conveying empathy and compassion, and we can use the good of social media groups to learn about their lived experiences. Now, according to Taylor and colleagues, the following are important to families when the practitioner do the following things. Regularly ask, show, to see how I'm doing, acknowledges his or her own mistakes or their mistakes, cares about including all of my children, not just the learner with disabilities, reassuring me that things will get better, acknowledging when treatment is not working, seems to have an understanding of what it is like for me to have a child with autism, understands when I have challenges implementing the protocols and treatment plans, understand my fears and anxiety about my child's future. Someone who's patient with me when training me to implement protocols. Understand what is struggling within parenting my child. Understanding how having a child with autism impacts the entire family dynamics. Acknowledging my feelings when discussing difficult or challenging circumstances. Respects my cultural values and beliefs. Someone who's compassionate and non-judgmental. Someone who cares about my capacity to parent my child, is optimistic about my child's capability and potential progress. Someone who's friendly, genuine, and warm. Someone who cares about me and my child. Acknowledges and expresses appreciation of my child's strengths, not just focus on the deficits. And acknowledge and celebrate every child's accomplishments. This is a really long list, but certainly it's still not a complete list. And as a mother of 2 neurodivergent children and a child who has autism, this list certainly has inter-observer agreement from me, from a mom. And I can assure you that these features are so critical to building a trusting, respectful, and productive relationship with the practitioners and clinicians who worked with me. Because it's a long journey and there's going to be bumps along the way. And if you can be that person for the family, it's going to endure this journey a lot better. Next. Okay, so we talked about establishing rapport. It's like a dance or pair skating with each party's responses serving as the SD for the more appropriate response. When we put a pause between the stimulus and the response, we can then observe the responses of the person we are interacting with. In this case, the family member. We can engage in more reflective practice and then choose a more appropriate response that will sustain rapport and trust with the families we serve. So for example, when we see the parent crying, looking down and covering their eyes for a few seconds, the more appropriate response is for us to pause for a moment and use a gentle tone of voice and say, hey, I'm noticing that a lot of emotion is showing up for you as you are talking about your child. And of course, the wrong response would be to ignore that parent's display of emotion and continue asking unrelated questions about the data. when the parent sounds frustrated and crosses their arms and saying, I have given the practitioner, I have given ABA a chance, and I feel I have to look for something else, something more. The practitioner uses a warm and gentle tone and say, when you say that you need more, what do you mean by that? What do you feel has been missing? Instead of being defensive, right? And continue to say, but we did so much for you, but if you only, would do more, if you only would practice what I've asked you to do. And when the parent looks embarrassed and says, it really feels weird to be telling you all about my family life when we barely know each other, the practitioner might, use a warm and gentle tone of voice and say, hey, I appreciate you sharing this information with me, even though it feels weird and uncomfortable for you. And of course, the wrong response might be the practitioner looking uncomfortable and saying something irrelevant like, when he hits you, does he hit with an open hand or closed hand, right? Something like that. So I guess to make the long message short is be human first. Be human first. And your skill sets will come through, but be human first to establish rapport. The next slide, Amy. Okay, and here are some barriers that would definitely reduce rapport with families, right? When the technician or practitioner seems to have their own agenda about the direction of the child's program, when they underestimate the child's ability, when they focus too much on the child's challenging behaviors and fail to communicate with me, when they focus too much on the child's deficits, or when they have like an authoritarian demeanor, rather than a collaborative one when discussing decisions about my child's program. Just because you are going to school for this, it doesn't mean I'm a lesser person than you, right? Just because I didn't, get my degree in applied behavior analysis, it doesn't mean I'm less. Or when someone appeared to be too busy to discuss things about my child's program that are really important to me, or seem distracted when we meet or talk, or interrupts me during meetings about my child, and uses too much technical language that I don't understand, right? So make sure you learn that bilingual language. Make sure you learn your behavior analytic jargon that you need to pass the exam, for those of you who are students, but also learn the layman's language so that you can communicate like a human, right? Next slide. And lastly, how we can build rapport with our supervisors and other service providers are important, right? Especially if you work in a school or clinic and the team consists of the speech path, the PT, the OT, the social worker, the school psych, right? There's a lot of different hats in the kitchen. In Neuringer's 1991 paper, Humble Behaviorism, he encouraged practitioners to adopt a position of humility as they practice with non-behavioral colleagues for the benefit of the client. And we need to appreciate that important research comes out of other fields too, right? We got physiology, cognitive, perceptual, developmental research, social research, and not just behavior analysis. We're not the only game in town, okay? I love our science, but we're not the only game in town. Our attention to other research areas increases the probability that others will also attend to our work. And if you take the time to go beyond, you're going to have more tools in your toolbox to solve problems. And there is much overlap between the field of behavioral research and other areas. And the humble behaviorist's goal is to discover the laws to solve problems together whenever possible with colleagues from different fields, rather, than to prove that we are correct and that we are correct. We are the only answer. We are the only game in town. According to Neuringer, if humble behavioral practices yield scientific and social progress, they will survive the test of time. And I highly recommend that you take a read this article if you have not come across it yet. Another great article is by Kirby and colleagues. And according to them, we need to exercise pride. We shouldn't exercise just pride and overconfidence, right? Because when we do that, it poses barriers to effective interprofessional collaboration. It can lead one to assume the position that practitioners of the same discipline are better trained and smarter than those of a different profession. And cultural humility is an alternative way to practice and to recognize that, we all have different cultures and history of reinforcement, and we all have implicit biases, and we just don't know it all, right? So to engage in humble behaviorism, we need to listen, to learn, and to collaborate. We need to consume research from other disciplines. And here we have, again, using social media groups for the good by learning about the latest articles, about other books, and about lived experiences of others. And there is a lot of good in social media, but of course we need to consume the content with caution. Next. Interprofessional collaboration. This is also important for you because you are the most important person other than the learner in regards to the educational team. You are the one that spends the most time with that client. You are the one that shoulder the most. You are the first point of contact. You see everything. You are the eyes and the ears for everyone when you work with that child, okay? So it's really important that you gain the skills to collaborate. To be a humble practitioner and engage in interprofessional collaboration, we need to acknowledge our own roles and responsibilities. We need to be candid and truthful about our limitations, what we know and what we don't know. We should not arbitrarily restrict someone to use the science. We don't own it, okay? We don't own the behavioral principles like reinforcement, and we are not the only practitioners qualified and entitled to use them. And remember our ethics, right? The practice of behavior analysis is founded on the same fundamental principles of ethics, benevolence, and do no harm. So as all other human service professionals have this ethical code. And ethical decisions are made through the integration of the best available evidence, clinical expertise, but also the client and family's preference and context. Those are really important, right? Not just what the data show in a journal article, okay? And when we communicate, we need to be flexible and bilingual, right? We talked about using the layman's language to explain things to families and to other professionals. And research has shown that behavior analytic jargon, such as discrimination, chaining, punishment, motivating operations, they have these negative connotations to other people, to other professionals and families, and are often considered to evoke unpleasant feelings. Can you imagine that, right? And yet, if you're a student and you're studying for the exam or you're doing your coursework, you probably spend so much time learning these definitions, right? But they're not going to be good for you to establish rapport if you don't know the vernacular language and the layman's language. Okay, and we need to practice cultural humility and reciprocity. That is to be effective collaborators. We need to regard professional differences as cultural differences and embrace them. That's it. Cultural diversity is the key. Okay. You got the next slide. Okay, this is good. I think this is a great visual from Kirby and colleagues, discriminating cultural humility and what is not. Again, understanding the non-exemplar is so important to understanding a concept, just as important as understanding the exemplars, right? So cultural humility is being open to opposing viewpoints, being open when others are telling you that I don't agree with you, okay? Recognizing that we would never be competent in another culture, but instead always striving to learn more about that culture, okay? That's the difference between cultural humility and cultural competence, because we can never get there, okay? Orienting to others instead of orienting to self, recognizing that our own biases and positionality, which are shaped by our history and experiences, and there are a lot more experiences than our own, and reflecting on our own biases so that we can avoid making assumptions about others. Next. The repertoire of self-reflection, listening, validating, and compromising, these skills can help us play nice in the sandbox with people we interact with, supervisors, families, colleagues. And some reflective questions that are examples of reflective repertoire. For example, we can ask ourselves, are my implicit biases negatively influencing the way we behave? Am I practicing within my scope of practice? Am I practicing within my scope of competence? Am I honest about that? What belief, value, or assumption is motivating my behavior? What assumptions have I made about my colleagues' knowledge and skills? Is our disagreement related to cultural differences? What do I value most and why? Does my behavior align with my values? What stereotypes am I relying on? Why do I care so much about this? What about this that makes me uncomfortable? Do I think my culture is superior? Why? Am I demonstrating humility? Or I think I'm better than others because of my abilities? And listening. Questions or comments that we can ask and say to be a better listener. You can say to your families, how do you explain that? You can say to your supervisor, help me understand what you mean by that. You can say to people you work with in the clinic, what would you recommend in this situation? Where can I read more about that? I'm still a little confused. Can you explain it again, please? Thank you for teaching me about your perspective. Oh, I totally misunderstood. Thanks for correcting me. I'm open to being persuaded. Tell me more. Let me try to summarize how I understand what you said. Those are great comments that you can use or inspire you to demonstrate the skills of a good listener. Validating. Examples of what we can say to validate others. This is an area in which our training differs. Hey, I appreciate you explaining that to me. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, your contributions were vital to this solution. Thanks for that. Hey, I see that you show me other approaches. They have merit too. I see. I think you believe, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you do this very well. Wow, I haven't thought about that approach or that strategy. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And here are some things that you can say or inspire you to say or do that might demonstrate the skills of a good compromiser, right? An alternative perspective is, for example, wow, I understand that differently, but I see what you're saying too. Wow, both are good ideas. How should we decide which to choose? There is another option to consider. I'm not convinced yet, but I'm open to hearing more about that from you. Hey, let's evaluate the evidence and let's make a decision together that we're both comfortable with. Hey, I'm willing to compromise as long as we use progress monitoring data to evaluate the decisions that we make. You know what? I think you've changed my mind about that. Wow, that's showing flexibility, isn't it? That's showing that you're not dogma, right? Sticking to dogma. Okay, next. These are hard skills, by the way. They're hard for all of us, okay? Burnout has been associated with job satisfaction, and job satisfaction is influenced by the support we get from others, like your supervisors, like your boss, like your manager. And our skill repertoire, such as self-reflecting, listening, validating, and compromising, can help us play nice in the sandbox. It can help us establish those SDs for others to respond. And in turn, we can establish more rapport, more buy-in, more collaboration, more support from others, more empathy from others. And in turn, this can influence our job satisfaction. That's it for me at this point, Amy.
Awesome. Well, that was terrific and insightful. Thank you, Celia. Let's wrap up with some practical takeaways, and then we should have some time for questions. So rapport building should be harmonious and ongoing. Take some time to reflect and brainstorm some rapport building activities. Talk with your supervisor about making rapport building a priority. Then be mindful at work to practice those strategies. Join an online community to share ideas and encouragement. Some Facebook groups that I would recommend. We have High Rasmus Professionals, ABA Skillshare, and then if you want to learn more about HRE, you can join the PFA and SBT community on Facebook as well. Okay, we have time for some questions. If you want to add them in the chat. Okay, yes, we will be sharing out. Anyone that registered for this webinar will receive the recording hopefully by the end of this week. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
I'm going to share something, a tip that I gave to a student, a supervisor earlier today. And I share with him that, you know, I'm not sure if there's a generation gap, but I remember I used to talk to people more on the phone, right? And in this generation, I find that people are texting more, right? They're communicating more by writing, okay, whether it's email, a text, or on social media. And there's so many benefits to that, of course, and I've gotten those benefits myself. But I also find that when you do that, especially for certain types of questions, concerns, troubleshooting, a text message or a writing, the sense modality of writing can sometimes miss out on a lot of these nonverbal cues. And a lot of times these nonverbal cues serve as SD to continue with that conversation, to continue with that engagement, right? So I urge you, if you have questions, if you have something that's concerning, if something just troubling you, pick up that phone and make a phone call or text someone and say, hey, when's a good time for us to have a chat? I bet that when you do that, you'll get more out of it. You'll be able to actually have a more fruitful dance, right? Because you're getting the SDs and responses from each other.
Awesome. And someone had requested, there were so many great questions that you shared, Celia. So as long as I have your permission, I can kind of add those on the email when I send that out. I'll add some of those resources. Great. Okay. Well, if you think of questions later, you can always email us, but we just want to take a moment to honor and thank our behavior technicians for your countless hard work. ABA therapy would not be possible without each and every one of you. We know that small changes add up to huge accomplishments in the future. So thank you for changing lives one session at a time.
Absolutely. And as a mother of an autistic child, you are our angels. If you want to know what an angel looks like, just look in the mirror. And this was a story that Dr. Pat Fryman had shared, and I totally resonate with that. I have some beautiful angels coming into my home and into our lives.
Awesome. Well, let's stay connected. Feel free to email us with questions, resources, or anything. And if you want to learn more about High Rasmus, you can follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you can also check out our website at highrasmus.com. And just thank you again for taking time to listen and grow with us tonight. We just really appreciate all of you being here and all of your hard work. Thank you.